Okay, so good morning everyone. So I hope like my screen that is notepad is visible and hopefully like you are able to hear me. Can I? Yeah, yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so let's get moving on. Okay, so we'll try to cover. So today we'll start with functions and we'll cover functions today. And after that, usual like we'll try to see one SQL scenario and one Python scenario and then we'll wrap it for the day. Secondly is like again like last week I did not told like how if like I'm giving you the assignments like how the assignments needs to be worked on and how the screenshots needs to be shared. So maybe like because of the time constraint or because of like something I missed that, so today I'll try to say that and let's take things forwards. Okay, ठीक है. So let's get started with today. Okay, so we will study, so sorry, not we will take ahead with Python concepts. So we'll try to understand today functions. Okay, because mostly in projects like we try to write repeatable reusable codes which are referenced into multiple programs. Okay, that's how like functions are created and we will be making use of it. Okay, cool. So function can be defined. Okay, so functions are nothing but they can be defined as a block of code which is reusable, block of code which is reusable or repeatable. Okay, and which can be called, whenever required. Okay, so that's how like Python sorry functions definition in terms of my language. Then what it allows is functions allows us, okay, to divide a large program. Okay, what it allows is to divide a large program, let's say into small blocks which are known as functions. Okay, so the functions contain set of programming statements, okay, enclosed in like curly braces. That's what we know. And a function as like it's a reusable and repeatable and whenever it can be called. So a function can be called multiple times to provide reusability and modularity. Okay, so a function can provide, a function can be called multiple times, okay, to provide reusability and modularity to the Python program. Okay, so if we define function, okay, so these are the three things which we can define or which you can say as, okay, functions are defined as block of code, okay, which are reusable, okay, and which are reusable or repeatable, and also it can be called whenever it is required, right? So it divides the big program into small piece of blocks which are a small piece of blocks which are known as functions. Okay, it can be called multiple times, and as it can be called multiple times, so it provides reusability, and it provides modularity because we can divide large programs into small programs, and that's they are like a Python functions. So the advantages like what we can see with the functions are like, okay, so we can avoid writing the same logic again and again or writing the same code again and again. Let's say if in a team, let's say there are there is a five resources who are working for the same project or for the same module, and there are like pieces of code like let's say when they are trying to connect to the Oracle database. Okay, so for let's say there could be multiple codes which are referencing to your Oracle database. At that moment of time you can think that, okay, so to connect to that database, whatever JDBC connection, the username, the password, whatever database we are trying to connect, whatever schema we are trying to connect. We can create a function and we can just call that function into our code whenever we are trying to reference or whenever trying to connect to the Oracle database. So similarly, like there are many scenarios where you will be able to write functions, and at that moment of time it will be helpful. Okay, so we will be seeing this in PySpark. What we will be doing is, okay, so initially, for once we start PySpark, for the first 2 days or one day, I don't know, it will be like, for one day it will be like as architecture and theoretical stuff, but from second day onwards we'll start writing basic programs. Once we complete 2 days, then we'll try to like write the code like, okay, programmatically, and like calling the functions here and there, because until unless you don't become comfortable in understanding the PySpark code, it will not make a sense to jump in directly to the programming mode. Okay. Okay, so let's get moving ahead. Okay. Then we can call Python functions, or functions to be precise, okay, any number of times in a program from any place. Okay, that's where like your reusability will come into picture. Okay, then we can divide a large program into a smaller programs. Okay, that's what it was asked. Okay, then okay, so main thing is like reusability. Okay, so reusability is the main achievement of the functions. How you will be defining the functions? Okay, we have a keyword called def. Okay, then we will be saying the function name. Okay, here you will be passing your constructors, arguments, or parameters. Okay, then whatever, so in Python when we write functions, okay, there is like docstring. Now, what is docstring? It is nothing but the documentation for your Python function. So as a developer, if you're trying to write the code, you try to mention some pointers. Okay, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. So if you want to mention, okay, this function is doing like connecting to Oracle database or reading CSV files or writing to the Kafka topic, okay, something like that. So you can write that over here, and then you can write statements over here. Statements are nothing but your pieces of code, right? Single statement, multiple line statement. That's how you'll be defining your functions. Okay, so quickly what I'll try to do is I'll try to enter my credentials. Okay, so once the Jupyter node, be ready with Jupyter node. Meanwhile, when coming up, okay, function row large, a basic function which is greeting like say wait, okay, okay, so let's say like I'm trying to provide some information related to function. Okay, so let's say this function greets to the greets to, okay, to the person. As of now, that's not much required. Okay, and I'm just writing a print function over here. Okay, print also is again one of a function. So here I'm saying hello. Okay, and let's say, so whatever the name which is entered while during the function call, okay, so it will be captured over here, and we will say, let's say good morning. Okay, so let me close this required. So let's open terminal and let's open a Jupyter. I should have taken a little long. Capture, record, backup, function, parameter, and at the end is calling function is, okay. Three lines the Jupyter, and we'll, okay, and we'll try. Okay, so if you see, this has been trying to functions return something with a return statement, or else like you'll have to like let's say you'll have to give a call to that function. Okay, so here the function name is nothing but greet, and let's say here I'm trying to pass a value as safe. Okay, so I'm just copying pasting this and executing this piece of line. Okay, so what it is telling this, mm, bad operand type, that is str. So we have to put the code on name. No. Yeah, I have already provided the code on the name, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. You could remove the comma. So that is this is okay. So it is telling the bad operand type. Okay, so okay. Concatenation. Okay, so let's say if I'm trying to remove this. Okay, so if you see, like there were just like small issues, like but again, like with concatenation symbol also it would work. Where is the void operand? Okay, so it's working now. Okay, so actually I made like small mistakes. Okay, so here like I have made use of the variable call in a different manner. So it's like comma, and here it's like I have used the concatenation, like okay, both ways, you know. So again, like I was trying to combine that and I was trying to get an error. Okay, so that was the issue. So again, like this is just like a very very basic function which we are trying to write. Okay, and when you're trying to call this. Okay, so similarly we'll be writing more kind of functions once we move ahead. Okay, so let's say so we'll try to write a simple function. Okay, so which will be like taking two numbers, and let's say it will be returning the addition of that number. Okay, so it's just like defining the, let's say, sum. It is taking my two parameters, that is nothing but a comma b. Okay, and here I'm trying to return, and let's say I'm trying to do a return that is nothing but summation of the two numbers which are entered by a user. Okay, I'll try to take the input from a user. Okay, so that is nothing but in the form of integer, and I'll try to take an input function, and I will tell enter the number. Okay, similarly what we will do is we will do the same thing for the second b. Okay, and finally what we'll try to do is we'll try to do print statement, and we will try to call that. So let's say sum equal to, and let's come out over here, and we will call that function in the print statement by passing the two arguments, that is nothing but a comma b. Okay, so let's copy this small piece. Okay, and paste this over here. So this is the function, addition function. I'm taking the input from the user, and in the print I'm calling this sum by passing the two arguments which will be like entered a and b. So that is what I'm trying to do over here. So it is asking, let's say I'm trying to enter 10, the second is nothing but 20, and the final summation what I am trying to get is nothing but a sum of a plus b which we have entered, that is 30. 10 plus 20 is nothing but your 30. Okay, so this is like how you will start writing your function. Now if you see, if you want to know like there are some documentations, or let's say some, if there are certain documented by a developer, like what this function goes. Okay, you can simply write a print statement. Okay, you can call that function name. So the function name was nothing but your greet. Okay, and you can just simply say underscore underscore doc underscore underscore. Okay, and if you try to run this, okay, so it will tell me, so under this function whatever the document string which we have written, we will get to know that. Okay, so that is like you'll have to take. Then a very important thing is nothing but your return statement. Okay, so return statement. Now, what our return statement, as the name itself suggests, it returns something, right? Okay, so what are return statement? Return statements are nothing but what it does, it exits a function. So the return statement, okay, is used to exit a function, okay, and go back to the place, okay, from where it was called. Okay, so what are the return statements? So the return statement is used to exit a function and go back to the place from where it is called. Okay, if you see, we had written this a plus b and it went to the function. So in a similar fashion that we'll be doing. So this statement can contain an expression which gets evaluated. Okay, so these statements, okay, so these statement can contain expressions, okay, expressions or logics, okay, whatever you are trying to build, which gets evaluated, okay, and the which gets evaluated and values are returned, or the outputs are returned. Okay, so if there is no expression in the statement, so let's say, okay, if there is no expression in the statement or the return statement is not present, so let's say if there is no expression, okay, or no return statement is present, okay, name statement is present inside a function, okay, inside a function, then the function will return, what it will return, it will return a none object. Okay, it's a very important point because sometimes when you are trying to apply a function, okay, and you will not be able to see the result, sometimes it will be black on the console or sometimes it will give you none. So at that moment of time you need to think, okay, whatever the function which I have written, whether it's returning something or not. Okay, so at that moment of time you can think on these terms. Why people are joining so late? Okay, so that's about your return statement. So let's say uh, we have just written a greet function a little top, right, a very small function, so it's just a greet function. So let's say here I'm trying to write, okay, so let's say I'm trying to write print, okay, greet, and let's say, and let me run this. Okay, so if you see, we are getting a none object because print is also a function and this is also a function. Okay, so print again it would have called this, so it is, this greet function is calling me the first line and then internally it is giving me the none. Okay, so that's like your you need to remember. Okay, so whenever like a function is not returning anything, so it will give you a none object, a very important point you'll have to remember. Okay, ठीक. So similarly you can start building your so again, like when it comes to functions, okay, so different types of arguments we can provide to the functions. Like we can provide the default args, or we can say we can provide the default arguments, we can provide the required arguments, okay, then we can provide the keyword argument. Are you able to hear me? Hello? Okay. Yeah, yes. Your volume is very low at my end. I don't know. My volume. So let me increase my volume. But again, like this is of my speaker now. I think we can hear you well. Okay, okay. I can hear you well. Cool, cool. Chalega. Okay, no issues. So what I was trying to say is like when we are trying to create functions, okay, we can pass like default arguments, required arguments, keyword arguments, okay. Then variable length argument, okay, variable arguments, okay, different types of like arguments we can pass, okay. So what does like your default argument says? As the name itself suggests, it's like okay. So what it says is Python allows, or any programming language, okay, so allows us to initialize, okay, to initialize the arguments, okay, at the function definition, we can say. Okay, so when we are trying to create function at that moment of time, we can define the arguments which we are trying to write. Okay, so if the value of any of the argument is not provided when you are trying to call, or when you are trying to call the function, okay, at that moment of time, at that time, okay, so the default values will be picked. Defaults values will be picked. So that it says. Okay, so let's say I am trying to define a function. Okay, so let's say I'm trying to define a function, and let's say that function is, let's say, result, whatever name I can give. Okay, so in here I'm trying to pass two parameters. One is name, and here I'm trying to pass age is equal to 30. So now I'm trying to pass like some value to this parameter, and I'm trying to write a small print statement in which I'm trying to say my name is, and I'm trying to pass my first parameter, that is name. Okay, then my name is F, and age is okay, and finally I'm trying to pass my second argument, or second parameter to be precise. So this is just with a small one-liner statement. Then I'm trying to call my function. When I'm trying to call my function, okay, I'm trying to pass, let's say, name equals to, let's say, Sandeep. Okay, and let's say again I'm trying to pass, let's again, even if I pass with this, so let's say Sandeep, and let's say pass, let's say 25 over here. So let's do a control C, and let's do a paste of this, and let's execute this piece. Okay, so what it's saying is my name is Sandeep and age is 25. Now here you are trying to pass your number of whatever the parameters or the constructors were there. So sorry, what are the parameters, the arguments were there. So it was like two parameters which were available, and you have successfully like passed that. Okay, or it was required. If you are like just omitting this, or means like you're not passing that, okay, so at that moment of time the value which are available like at the default level, which are given at the function definition, that would be getting replaced. Okay, so at sometimes like there could be some scenarios when you're trying to write functions, okay, few values could be constant which will not be changing at any point of time during the program execution, or the function execution, or the code execution. At that moment of time you can think creating those parameters in the function call as a default argument. Okay, so that's like you will have to think, and let's say I'm trying to pass something like this. Okay, so if you see now, this is not behaving appropriately because it is expecting the first parameter as the name and the second parameter as your age. Okay, so again you need to keep an eye on that also. For that for purpose we have like keyword arguments. Okay, so we'll try to see that. Okay, so in the default arguments it's nothing but the values are passed at the function call. Okay, and if during the function call if the values are not, you're not passing, it would be taken from the default as where like you have already provided. Okay, it's a straightforward, nothing like in that. So when it comes to required arguments, okay, so the required arguments are nothing but uh, as far as the requirement arguments are concerned. Okay, so these are the arguments which are required to be passed. Okay, so these are the arguments which are required, as the name itself suggests, required. Okay, it is needed, so which are required to be passed, okay, at the time of function call. Okay, at the time of function call to match the exact parameters or their positions, you can say. Okay, so when you're trying to write some function, okay, and when you're trying to define going with like the required arguments, so at that moment of time a user or the during the function call those values needs to be passed. There is no way out. Okay, so we'll try to take the same piece of code. Okay, I'll just do a quick copy paste of that. Okay, and let's say I'm trying to, let's say, let's change this. So let's say I'm trying to define a greet function. I'm trying to take a name, and let's say in place of age let's take a message. Okay, and we are calling this message. So even like we'll need to change this. Let's change quickly. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, let's say hello. Okay, so let's say then we have name. Okay, then hello Seth, and let's say we will try to pass, and let's give a period, and after that let's give, let's say, message. Okay, so whatever the message we are trying to pass. Okay, and we'll try to call that. So let's say we are trying to call the greet function. Okay, and here I'm trying to pass the two arguments. So let's say Seth, and the second argument is nothing but your good morning. Okay, so in a similar fashion which we have written a little while earlier, so the same thing we are trying to write here back. Okay, so name message is not defined, so there's a typo error. So let's re-rectify that as well, and let's re-execute this small piece of code. Okay, so hello Seth, good morning. Now here like the arguments which are provided, sorry, which are written has to be passed. That is what the message it is telling us. So if I just omit one of the arguments or one of the parameters, it will complain that it requires two puts, sorry, it requires one put argument is missing. Okay, so if you remember these errors we have got a little while earlier in yesterday's or like last week's sessions also, when we were trying to put something into methods and function calls and we were missing something. So that's how like your required arguments will be. Okay, so when it comes to keyword arguments, like if you remember the when you remember the format string method which I was trying to explain, at that moment of time I explained like three different. It's like a vanilla format, like where we are trying to reference those string identifiers with empty braces. Okay, in the dot format option. Then secondly, like we did with indexing with by using the 0, 1 and so on, and the third was like keyword, by based on your keywords you are trying to do the format. In a similar fashion here also we have that flexibility of providing the keywords and taking the output. Okay, so what Python allows us to call the function, okay, which we can use as keywords. Okay, so this kind of function, what we can say is this kind of function. Okay, so this kind of function call gives the flexibility or enables us, okay, enables us to pass the arguments pass the arguments in random order. Okay, because in the first one, like when we were trying to do, it was giving me the like default or like required. So if I'm passing like in the first parameter, if I'm passing the second parameter value, no doubt it is speaking, but that is not, the output is not coming appropriate. Okay, so if like your function call at the time, if you want to put some random orders at that moment of time, this kind of function will give you the flexibility to give the values in a random order. Okay, so the name of arguments, okay, is treated as the keywords, and when they are matched, okay, and matched in the function call or in the function call of definition, you can say. Okay, so if the match is found, the values of the arguments are copied into the function definition, and that's where your function will be returning something. Okay, so if we take the same example over here, so let's say I'll just copy this as is. Okay, so let's say I'm trying to, let's say, required greet. Okay, so I'm trying to define a function, okay, which is taking two parameters. So let's say the first is name, okay, and let's say the second is message. Now what we will try to do is, okay, so here we will try to let's say pass something. Okay, so mm, let's say let's copy this and paste this. Okay, so this will create me the required greet function. When I'm trying to call my required greet, okay, let's say here I'm trying to pass name, let's say message equals to, let's say good night. Okay, and the second thing is nothing but your name is equals to this. So I'm just trying to follow a random order. Let's see if it picks, or else like I need to pass at the definition level. Okay, so if you see, now we are getting again the same error, same mistake. Hmm. Okay, so now if you see, earlier the error was like some typo issues, like or typo mistakes which I made. Now this here in this function, like it is giving me the flexibility to push the messages or to push the values during the function call in a random order. I'm not worried about like how the function is means how the parameters are following the sequence at the function definition. Okay, over here, which what I mean to say, but at the function call, there comes a requirement that you'll have to pass the parameters also with the value which you're trying to. Okay, so that is like one extra burden you'll have to understand, but again, like it gives you the flexibility of pushing or calling the functions randomly. Okay, so you can play with all these things. Okay, mostly like we will be like once we go to with PySpark, we will be like playing with variable arguments. Okay, that the variable arguments or like kw args, like the keyword args, okay, which we will see a little later. So in the variable like mostly like what happens is, okay, so in large projects what happen, in any projects, it's nothing but large projects. So sometimes what happen is we may not know, okay, we may not know the number of arguments which are passed, so the number of arguments to be passed in advance. Okay, so what happen is in projects, okay, let's remove this large keyword. So in projects, sometimes what happens is we don't know how many numbers of arguments will be passing, so we are unsure of that. Okay, in such cases, we have like one flexibility. So in such cases, okay, so Python provides us the flexibility. So let's say functions gives us the flexibility, okay, flexibility to provide, okay, to provide comma separated values, okay, which are internally internally treated as tuples, okay, at the time of function call. Okay, so same thing like what we have done a little while earlier. So what I'll try to do, I'll try to define a function with the def keyword, okay, and let's say I'm trying to write, let's say, names, the means like, let's say the function name is, let's say, names, and I'm trying to put asterisk over here, okay, and let's say here I'm trying to take one parameter, that is nm, and here I'm trying to write, let's say, print statement, and so let's say type of type of arguments, or let's say type of arguments passed, okay, so and here I will call that type of let's say nm, okay, and what I will try to do is I'll try to switch to the new line. Then let's write a print function, and let's say printing values pass to function argument, or let's say function to arguments, and let's say I'm trying to write a small for loop. So let's say for I in uh, nm, right? So this will be iterating on that. So that is for I in nm. Then let's say print my I, okay, and I will call my function that is nothing but my names, okay, and in this, let's say we'll try to pass multiple names. Let's say Saf, let's say Pripal. Sorry for the mistake if I'm trying to make any. So let's say Sandeep, okay. Then let's say Malini, okay. Let's say there are a few things. So what I'm trying to do over here is, see, I don't know during the function call what will be the number of arguments passed. Okay, so at that moment of time, okay, so I'm just trying to prefix that an asterisk. Okay, so that is like what I am trying to do. So these are the two print statements, okay, which we'll be taking. So I'm trying to apply a loop. Okay, so I'm trying to apply a loop, that is for loop. Okay, I'm iterating on each number, on each arguments. Okay, so that will be available in your function call. So that is nothing but your nm. Okay, so these will be the parameters. So I'm iterating, and finally I'm trying to do a print call. So let's copy this and paste this. First let's execute this. Okay, looks good. Okay, and then we'll try to finally pass some random, not random, I would say, not fixed number of arguments. Okay, so that's like a variable length of arguments. Okay, so if you see, this is what I wanted to show. That's why I've written a type of like a, I told somewhere, so here like tuples. Okay, so internally they are treated as tuples at the time of functional call. So that's why I wanted to show that for that purpose I have written this. Again, this new line was not required, okay, because it is jumping to the new line again. So let's re-execute this and re-execute this piece of code. Okay, so these are the two print statements which I have written, and whatever number of values or are passing through a function call at that moment of time, those values will be printed. Okay, so like when you learn or when you start with functions, okay, so always like you will be learning these basic functionalities of defining a function, like what is the function, like how you define the function, what are the keywords, what are the return statements, what it returns when you don't provide anything. Okay, So, and these are the default arguments, required arguments, variable arguments, and keyword arguments. Okay. So this is just like an introduction to functions which I told. Any questions which you feel? Anything? Okay. So if no questions, okay. Okay. So what we will do is, in interviews they'll ask you, okay, so what are recursive functions, higher order functions, okay. So these are the two questions which are like generally asked in interviews. Okay. So let's understand recursive function. Or do you want to take a quick break of 5 minutes? Because it will take a little. Okay, let's complete this and let's take a break. So recursive function. Okay, as the name itself suggests, okay, it is like doing something again and again. Again, functions do the same thing repeatedly. So recursive means like uh, at a synonym, like what I would say is like going again at the end, like doing again and again, but to an extent like what synonym I could say. Not getting that synonym. So let's say recursive, recursive meaning. Okay, so relating or involving in repeated application. Again, it's like doing the same thing. So again, like it's related to the function call only. So what I was trying to explain, but I was not getting a proper word. So recursive. Okay. So see how I means like recursive functions are nothing but those functions whenever you are trying to define a function. Okay, recursive, it goes to that function till the time it is reached to the base of 1 or base of 0. Okay, so it calls that function again and again. Okay, no doubt the function calls and again. Okay, but in Python a function can call other function. Okay, also it is possible for the function called to call inst itself. So what I'm trying to say is a function can call other function. Okay, okay, and at the same time, let's say, and it is possible for the function, okay, to call itself. So when I was trying to say recursive, this is like what I was trying to explain, trying to relate. So recursive function is nothing but calling the same function, which is nothing but the function which we are defining itself again and again till it reaches to the base level. Okay, so the base levels are nothing but your ones and zeros. Okay, so these types of constructs are called your recursive functions. That's what you say. Okay, and we always know, whenever we started learning Python or not, so whenever we started learning any programming language, okay, so we have always seen a factorial program as a recursive example. Okay, so let's understand with that how the recursive function behaves. Okay, and like again, so let's say factorial function, or let's say factorial recursive. So we all know what is factorial. Okay, so the multiplication of a let's say I'm taking an input from a user, and let's say the user is inputting 5. Okay, so what will happen is, so it will go to the base level of 1. So 5 will multiplied by 4, the outcome will be there. Then 4 will be multiplied by 3, then will be some outcome. And 3 will be multiplied by 2, and finally 2 will be multiplied by 1. Okay, so whatever the multiplication of this, the value would be, and the output would be resulting in the summation of that. So that is nothing but your factorial. So factorial is nothing but the product of all the integers, okay, from 1 to that number. That is nothing but your factorial. Okay, so what we will do is, we'll try to define a function which is nothing but a recursive, and that recursive function, what it will do is, okay, it will try to find the factorial of a given number. Okay, so let's do that. Again, like, see, again, everyone has their own methods of like writing the code and functions. So I mostly like 90% it will be same, but few things like people try to write code separately or differently, so that will play a little role. Okay, so let's say I'm trying to define a function, and let's say I'm trying to say that function name is nothing but a factorial. I'm taking an argument, okay, and and so see, if a user is entering one, so one will be like always like one. So what I'll say, let's say if a user is entering one, so if let's say if x equals to 1, 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. So let's say x equals to 1, I would say return 1, because it won't have a factorial of 1, because it's just a base number, or it won't go. Else, I would say 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 return. So what you'll have to return, you'll have to return that x. You'll have to call that function, which is nothing but the factorial. Recursively, you'll have to go there, and then as you need to degrade or descend, so what you'll have to do is you'll have to do x minus 1, right? Okay, so that is the one thing. Okay, so let's say if a user is entering a number which is nothing but a 5. Okay, that's what the example which we are trying to understand. Okay, so if number is, let's say, see, when you're trying to write the code, there could be scenarios where you'll have to test like some positives or negative also. So what if like the user is entering a number which is less than 0 or negative number? At that moment of time, you'll have to instruct a user, okay, enter some like number which is a positive number and greater than 1, depending on the scenario. Okay, it's not that always. So let's say if a user is entering less than 0. Okay, so I will instruct the user. So let's say please enter a number, okay, greater than 0. 1 2 3. Okay, so that is like first if statement which I'm trying to say. Then again I'm trying to write elif. Let's say what if like the number which has been entered by the user is again a 0. Okay, so let's say again I'm trying to write a print statement, and I'm instructing. Okay, so factorial of 0 is 1. मेरा 1 का, yeah. So let's say factorial of number. Okay, so let's say 0 is 1. Let's say I'm trying to give this instruction. Then finally my actual call. Okay, so let's say I'm trying to do a print, and I'm trying to write, let's say, factorial of a number. Okay, so we will call that number which is entered by a user. Okay, and let's say I'm trying to assign a equal to sign, and I'm trying to call my function, that is nothing but my function is factorial, right? And here I'm trying to pass that num. Okay, so let's say this is a small function which I have defined, that is factorial. Okay, so x, it is taking 1. Let's test this step by step whether the information or the code which I have written is appropriate or not. Okay, so let's test with the first one. So let's create this function, and let's execute this piece. Okay, so there are no errors, looks good. Now let's try to enter all these information. So let's copy this, and let's paste this, and let's execute this. Okay, so it is giving us the invalid syntax. Let's verify that. So could be some indentation issue. So let's enter this, and let's do a tab, and let's re-execute this piece. Okay, so which elif? Okay, so let's, okay, sorry, my mistake. So if number equals to 0, let's take this up, and I think the indentation is good. Okay, so cool. So there were some glitches in the code which while writing. Okay, so I have eradicated that. Okay, so now if you see what I have done is, okay, first I have defined a function, okay, which is nothing but a small function of a factorial. Okay, so what it is doing is, okay, whatever the number which is entered by a user, so let's say we have taken an example of 5. Okay, so 5 into, so as like the factorial is nothing but a product of the number and the summation of those numbers. Okay, so here if you see, we are calling that function again whatever we are defining, and here we are trying to do x minus 1. So this is like a function call which is nothing but we are trying to call the function itself, which is nothing but your recursively we are calling that function. And a function can call other functions also. This is again like higher order functions which we'll see later. Now for the first thing, if you see, it will be 5. Okay, so 5 into 4, because we are writing like factorial. So x was 5 minus 1 will go. Now what will happen is this function will be called again, which is nothing but the recursive. So again this will happen, so the second flow will happen. So this is nothing but 4x, the value will be passed as the 4 over here. Then again the function will come till the time your factorial like reaches to the base level of 1. This recursive function will keep on repeating. Okay, and that's how like your factorial of any number can be calculated. So I've just taken like randomly 5. You can input any number, it will try to give you the output of that. Okay, so I'm not trying to change my function over here. So the code is written once and I'm trying to call multiple times at certain places, so which is giving me the modularity of the code. As of now it's not a big one, but at least it is giving me the reusability or repeatable of the code, which I don't need to write and again. So that's why like functions are like essential part of your programming when you'll go to your PySpark coding. Okay, any questions in this recursive explanation? No, there is a glitch in this program, and again like not glitch I would say, uh, not glitch I would say, but let's say if I try to take, let's say, number as, let's say, 100. Let's see. Okay, it is giving me a quick output. mm, so let's say, what if like I try to take as 1000. There is one scenario which I have seen. Okay, it is giving me the output very quickly. Actually, what happens in recursive function? Okay, so this function call is repeating itself again and again. Okay, so what happens is internally, okay, so it is using its cache. Okay, it is using your memory. So I have seen somewhere, but I'm not able to recollect that. Okay, when you try to enter your, okay, so let's I got that where I am getting. Okay, and no questions in this, right? Let me show you one glitch in recursive function. Not glitch I would say, let's say performance kind of thing in performance. One of the thing like which I have seen. So let's see that. So let's say optimization, which we will see, or let's say performance, something not related to performance also. So let's say what I want to do is, we all know what is Fibonacci series. Okay, so Fibonacci series, any idea like what is Fibonacci series? Addition of like, any suggestions like what we know about Fibonacci series?
It's like 2, 3,
Yes.
5, the addition of the previous
Right,
number.
right. So if I enter, like it will be like 0, 1, then 1, then 2, then 3, right? So it's like addition of like the previous two numbers, right? Data.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Yeah. So again, like see, again like there are some optimization process which comes. Okay, first let me write a small program for Fibonacci series. Okay, so let's say I'm trying to write a Fibonacci series program. So let's say Fibonacci series. Okay, so here I'm trying to write, and let's say I'm taking an input. Okay, And so let's say if a user is entering a value which is equal to 1, okay, so return as 1, so won't be any change. अरे नहीं. Okay, then let's say elif, then n equals to 2. So अगर वो 2 डालेगा, so yeah, so again I need to just return 1 because 0 and 1, okay, something like that. 0 1. Why this is giving me an issue? Okay, and let's say elif, let's say n is, let's say, greater than 2 number when a user is entering. Actually my actual code will start over here. So okay, so let's say I'm trying to write a return. So this is nothing but my Fibonacci series program, which I want to call it recursively. Okay, so it is nothing but like addition of your two previous number. Okay, so what I will do is, let's say here I'm trying to write n minus 1, okay, and like plus the same I'm trying to call with n minus 2. Okay, so it's like just like the previous two numbers, I need to add that. Okay, so just I'm trying to write, that is like the small function which I have defined, and here I'm trying to write, let's say for I in range, okay, and let's say I'm trying to write 1 comma 11, I'm trying to print the first 10 digit of Fibonacci series. So let's say print, okay, so let's say the value of I, and let's say colon, okay, and the actual function which is nothing but your Fibonacci series, okay, and we will pass n to it, right? Let's execute this. Okay, so it is telling invalid syntax, so there's again a typo, that's my mistake. Let's execute this again. Okay, so name n is not defined. So
The line 10, we need to pass I, right?
say I, ठीक है, looks good. Okay, so as of now I am, if you see, when I'm entering the value, I'm getting some output. Okay, so like addition of my so 1, so 1 plus 1 is like 2, then 1 plus 2 is nothing but 3, then 2 plus 3 is nothing but your 5. Okay, so I'm getting my output appropriately. Okay, but now let's take an example. I'm just increasing this number from let's say to 100. Okay, and I'm executing this. See, if you see a little while earlier, or let me re-execute this code again, I'm getting my output instantaneously. Okay, now what happens in recursive function, as I told earlier in the explanation, it goes till the base level. It starts from the higher level and it goes till the base level. Now when you are trying to do, okay, over here, so this recursive function is called again and again. So at the moment of time, this number recursive call to the same function is like less, okay, which is less than like your by default maximum size, which is saved in your LRU cache, which is nothing but least recently used cache. So that's why I'm getting a output instantaneously. But if I just increase this number, so let me execute this piece of code. Okay, now if you see at the 30, 31, see it is stopping. See 35, it stopped 36. So as the recursive calls are more and more, okay, so it is again dangerous also for us. Okay, because it is using your internal cache and that is not able to hold or call that instantaneously, and at the end because of that your function is giving a performance hit. Okay, so at that moment of time you will have to think how you can optimize your code. Okay, but here like we have one function which is nothing but LRU cache. Okay, so least recently used cache. So by default, that size is to 128. And this is coming from a package that is nothing but your functools. Okay, so from functools, I'm importing this. Okay, and I'm referencing that, okay, which is nothing but my least recent use cache. And as I told, by default, the max size is nothing but your 128. That's why, like, beyond that recursive calls of this cache, it is consuming some time. So I'll just try to increase to 500. Let's increase to 1000 to be a safer side. And let's give an execution to the same code again. Okay, let's execute this piece. If you see, instantaneously I'm getting the result now. In the early way, in the earlier, at the, I mean, it's like a little while earlier, it was like not stucking, it was like consuming a little time at 36, 37 or so, or like 30 plus. So recursive calls are like a little like dangerous. I won't say dangerous, but again, like you need to think it's like a cache consuming or memory consuming, because that call, that the function call is called, the function call is done again and again to itself, and it uses, and it has to reference a value in your cache, and at that moment of time it might degrade your function performance. Okay, so similarly, once you go to PySpark, okay, when you are trying to write the code, you need to think like, okay, initially you'll be writing the code, but when you are moving ahead, you need to think how can I optimize the code, because in the project level there will be like optimization issues or performance issues. Okay, so those things will come into picture, we will see that. Okay, so this is like your recursive functions. Okay, which which is like a frequently asked question in interview. Whenever you go, mostly you will find like, what is a recursive function? Can you give me an example of that? Okay, any questions?
Varsha here, I have one question. In this program, you have used LRU. So, I mean, what does internally does the LRU? So, the output of using it and without using it has increased.
I just missed the last statement.
My question is like, what does LRU does?
Okay, okay. So LRU is nothing but it's a least recently used cache. Okay, or last recently used cache. So what exactly it is doing is, okay, see, what exactly happening in the earlier code when I was trying to execute with a lesser number. So let's say I want to find out the Fibonacci series of like a very small number from 1 to 10. Okay, now in this, what it is happening is I'm trying to call these two functions, correct, again and again, right? So when it is trying to call this function, it is going to the function call, and it needs to remember what was the last value which was used, because it needs to take those values ahead. If you see, for the first time, like let's say when we are trying to enter a value of, let's say the user is entering a number called 7, right? So if you want to do a summation, so if you see, this is a function call. Okay, these are the two function calls. Then it is trying to do n minus 1 and n minus 2. It is going to this function. Now every time it is going to the function, and these values are stored. Okay, where they are stored? In the cache. So when they are trying to call the same function recursively again and again, so this value is becoming, now it is very now it is very within like 128 MB or 128, which is nothing but the maximum size. So it is able to allocate that and run it quickly. But when you're trying to increase this number more than that, so this cache, the holding value of that cache for this function call is taking, means like is consuming more things, means like it is getting built more and more. It means like it needs to store more values, because how this will be going is, let me open MS Paint. Okay, so if you take, just to simulate an example, let's say, and let me take a black color. So let's say we have written, let's say 1000, or let's say 100, right? So there is like n minus 1, and let's say there is n minus 2. Okay, so n minus 1 is nothing but your, let's say, 99, and this is nothing but your 98. Okay, first we will take like with a smaller one, like you will understand a little. So let's say first was like 10, right? So at that moment of time, like n minus 1 was like 9. Okay, and let's say n minus 2 was 8. Again this function was called, so again it had like n minus 1, so it is n minus 1 is nothing but, let's say, 8. Then it had like 7, right? Same way here it had like 7. Okay, and it had like a 6. Again it is going down. Okay, so 8 minus 1 is nothing but 7 and 6. Here also, like, again it is going down. Okay, it is 7 minus 1 is 6 and 5. So if you see, I'm just taking, I have not completed, I have not reached to the base level of 1, because again I'll have to scroll a little down, but you can assume that. Okay, so if you see, so many times the function call is happening. Okay, and all these values are stored in cache. So if the number is less, okay, which is lesser than your 128, okay, so it was able to perform that operation instantaneously and return the output. Now as I'm entering a bigger number, or I want to do some bigger number logic calculation, which is nothing but a Fibonacci series, at that moment of time my recursive call are so many. So here if you see just 10, it would have come till here 1 and 0. Again I have not completed. Okay, in between there will be like 4, 3, 2, and then it will be 1 and 0. For 10 I have so many recursive call at this side and this side. So that's why, like, the cache which is holding all these function call values, means like it's like max it can hold 128. But when I'm trying to enter a number greater than that, okay, so let's say I'm trying to call, in my scenario, what I was trying to do, I was trying to do this. So at that moment of time it was like becoming a little slower. Why? Because that function call had to go again and again, and that number was very huge. So the values which were being referenced in the cache were huge, and hence it was becoming a little slower. To make it a little optimized, what I have used is I have increased that cache value from 128 to 1000. Hence, it is giving me a little optimized performance. Got it?
Okay, basically it modifies the cache. I can understand.
Yes, yes, yes. So it just like means like increasing the cache size, so that if you want to reference that value and again, so it can hold more values and it can go to that recursive call and it will return the output, because it needs to
Okay.
reference some values. Okay. Any questions apart from that? No. Let's take a quick break of 10 minutes and we'll move. We'll take that higher order. Okay. So let's understand like higher order functions. Okay. So again, like this is one like you might maybe questioned in interviews. Okay. So what are higher order functions? Okay. So in Python, what are happening is uh, a function, okay, which can take a function can take one or more functions as an arguments, or as arguments. Okay, so that is thing. And a function can be returned, okay, as a result of another function. Okay, so these are like the two pointers which are making a function as a higher order function. Okay, so a function can take one or more functions as argument, so that is termed as higher order function. Or a function can be returned, okay, as a result of another function. Okay, so we'll try to understand both the statements. Okay, so let's see functions as arguments. Let's say I'm trying to define a function sum. Okay, and I'm trying to pass numbers over here. Okay, so 1 2 3 4, and here I'm trying to, let's say, return. So what I'm trying to return, so let's say I'm trying to return sum. I'll just name this a different manner. So let's say sum function. Okay, so here what I will say, I will just say sum of nums. Okay, so I've defined a two-liner function. Now what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to define one more function. Okay, so let's say this is the, yeah, let's say second function, or let's say we can write anything name. So let's write main function. Okay, now here what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pass function as an argument. Okay, so it was telling a function can take one or more functions as an argument. So I'm trying to pass function as an argument. That is one thing. And here I'm trying to pass like a variable length args, which we have just recently seen a little while earlier. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm trying to do some calculation, that is result. Then whatever I will be passing to the function, and in that I will be having multiple args. That is the thing, and finally I will try to print my result. Okay, so let's say I'm trying to call my main function over here. In this I'm trying to call my first function, that is nothing but my sum. Okay, func. So that is the first function which is called. So, and here I'm trying to pass multiple arguments, right? So let's say I'm trying to pass 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here I'm trying to show like a function can take one or more functions as argument. Okay, so this is like a sum function which is doing the sum. Okay, so the second function which is taking a function as an argument. Okay, so when I'm trying to call this main function over here, okay, so this f is nothing but a function which is taking another function. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to pass one function as argument, and that is called higher order function. So in this function, I'm trying to pass one function as an argument, okay, which I have created over here. So that is getting passed over here. And here we have written multiple args. So I'm just passing some numbers, random numbers, and let's execute this piece and let's see the result. Okay, so if you see, we are getting the output as 15. That is the summation of these three numbers. If I just pass 10, 20, and let's say 30, so we should get an answer of 60. So that is like how it is done. So what we are trying to do over here is, it's as simple like you create functions and pass to other functions. Okay, so the main function took in another function. So that's how you can do with the first statement as an argument. Okay, then the second one is nothing but a function can return another value, something like that. Okay, so what is this guy is saying? Power issue. Okay, so let's say this was the first statement which we have seen. Now we'll try to see the second thing is having a function as a return value. Okay, so a function can be returned as a result of another function. So the second thing which I'm trying to show is like let's say I'm trying to define a function. So this is, let's say, second point. Okay, and let's say this is my first point which I am trying to show. So what we can do is, let's quickly copy this, and just for reference you can keep this over here, and just quickly copy this, and let's keep this over here. Okay, now what we are trying to do is, okay, so I'm trying to let's say I'm trying to create one function, that is add two numbers. I'm passing two parameters, that is x comma y. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm trying to return the summation of that, that is addition of this. So this is first function which I have defined. Okay, let's say let me copy this quickly, control C, Control V. Okay, now I'm trying to add, let's say, three numbers. Okay, and I'm trying to say x comma y comma z, and here I'm trying to say x plus y plus z. Okay, so what I have done is I have created two functions which is adding two numbers and which is adding three numbers. Now what I am trying to do, I will try to create a function which returns function depending on the logic. So what I mean to say is, let's say, let me create a function. Okay, and so out of these two function, I want to return function. So let's say get function. Okay, so I'm just trying to write some name. Okay, and number of len. Okay, so one parameter I have passed. So let's say number of len 1 2 1 2 3 4. Okay, and here I'm trying to write certain condition. Now see the condition. What I'm trying to write, if my number of len, okay, it is if it is equal to 3. If it is equal to 3, okay, I need to return this. So that is nothing but add 3 number. Okay, so if the user or whatever the, let's say, three values are entered, okay, what we are trying to return, I missed return keyword. Okay, so what I'm trying to return, I'm trying to return add 3 num. And what is this add 3 num? Add 3 number is nothing but a function. So a function can be returned as a result of another function. So here I'm trying to return a function as a result, and this it will be going and jumping over here. Let's try to write one more else condition. 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, and in this else condition I'm trying to return, let's say, add uh, 2 num. Okay, I've created two functions to do summation. One function, if a user is entering, let's say, 2 digit or 3 digit, okay, like the number of arguments or uh, the number of parameters which are passed to the function. So based on that, I'm just selecting which function should perform. So here what I'm trying to say, let's say args equals to, I'm trying to define a list, and in this list, let's say I'm trying to pass 3 digits, 1 2 3, just for an example. Okay, and I'm trying to say number of len equals to len of args, right? Because I need to understand whether the number of length is either 2 or 3. Again, you can do like a negative handling like -1 -2 0, but as of now I'm just showing the functionality. Okay, I'm not handling the required scenarios. If it goes wrong, what will happen? Okay, so here I'm trying to say, let's say result function equals to, I'm trying to call this function over here, which is nothing but my get func. I'm assigning that to a identifier. Okay, and it is expecting a parameter that is nothing but my number of length. And finally, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to, I think, yeah. So I think I am almost done with my logic. So this is the result function, and let me quickly copy this and paste this. This result function will have the number of args, right? So three functions are being written. So let's say I'm passing some number, keeping in that args. I'm trying to find len of args, so 2 or 3. Based on that, which function needs to be performed. Then I'm trying to call that function and pass to that variable, and then I'm trying to do call. Looks good to me. Okay, if any issues, we'll try to debug. Let's remove this. Okay, and okay, so let's execute this piece of code and let's understand what is happening. Okay, so 1 plus 2 plus 3 looks good. So let's change this and let's test this. Yeah, looks good. I think this is not because it is returning me an object not required. Okay, now let me explain this what I have written. Okay, So what I'm trying to do is, see, these are the two functions. I hope like this is not required me to explain because it's a two-line of code. Here I'm trying to create a function which is taking some parameters, okay, which is numlen. Okay, now if that numlen is equal to 3, execute this function or return this function. If that is not 3, let's say it's 2, so return this function. Okay, and if it is less than 2, I have not handled that elif, or means you can handle those conditions. Now I just need to understand whether the length is entered by the user either 3 or 2, because the function I've written that, so that's why I'm writing. So I'm writing that in a one variable, that is args. I'm trying to find out the length. So if it is 3, okay, so this condition will be meeting. If it is 2, okay, it will go to the else part and it will go over here. So based on that, my functions are returned. So a function can be returned as a result of another function. So here I'm trying to return, and this is referencing to the function. So that's why these are like your higher order functions, okay, which can take one or more functions as argument, or they can return as a result of another functions also. Okay, so that's like you will be like asked in interviews if you are going. Okay, so higher order functions, recursive functions, they will always ask you. Any questions in this higher order functions? Are we able to understand like what I demonstrated? Getting right? Uh, okay, cool. Now, very important thing which is coming, which you will be doing frequently in PySpark. Okay, that is nothing but your anonymous, or we famously say those as lambda functions. You will be always doing this. Okay, so what are anonymous or lambda functions? Okay, Python allows us to declare the function, okay, so in the standard manner, that is by using the def keyword, which we have seen a little while earlier. So with the def keyword, like we can give the name to that function, and that's how the functions are defined. So that's like how normally the functions are defined in Python. Okay, but there are some there are some times like you have to write some function during the execution, and that will not be referenced multiple times, so they are called anonymous functions. Okay, so anonymous functions are declared, okay, using lambda keyword. Okay, so lambda functions can accept any number of arguments. So let's write, so lambda functions can accept any number of arguments. Okay, but a very important point, they can return only one value, and that too in the form of the one value in the form of expression. Okay, so that's how like your anonymous functions, or you call your lambda functions, and we would be like doing, means like once we start with PySpark, like heavily we with strings. So the main role of lambda function is like better described in the scenarios like where we are like anonymously doing something, and we don't want to reference it. Okay, the lambda function can be used as an argument to the higher order function also. Okay, so that what we can do. Let's understand how we can write anonymous function or lambda function. Okay, so let's say I want to print a table. Okay, so print a table. So let's say print a table of 2. Okay, so how will I do in like a traditional programming language? So let's say n equals to 2. I'm taking an input from a user. You can take that input, use input function. Let's say for I in range. Okay, and let's say 1 to 10. So I want to print 1 2 3 4. Okay, and simply what I will say, I will try to say print statement, right? and here I'm trying to say, let's say table of, okay, and uh, let's say the empty identifier I'm trying to say table of 2 is, let's say, in empty braces into empty braces equals to empty braces, okay, and I will just write a dot format, and so the so the user will be entering that number, that is 2, okay, so 2 into the number of iteration, that is 1 into 10, equal to, so no no no, so it will be n comma I, and that will be this. So the table of n into I, so that is this result, okay, so that's what I have written over here, okay, so it's just like a small print table statement. So let me remove this, let me copy this, and okay, I've already copied from here itself, okay, okay. So what we will do is we'll copy this print to a table, and we will try to execute this, okay. So if you see table of 2 is so on. Now I have used a for loop, okay, so the same can be achieved through lambda function by defining a functions also. Lambda function, how we can write that, again I can write using while loop also. You can go with your while loop also if you want to see, okay, but let's understand how I can write using my lambda or an anonymous function. So I'm trying to define a function. Okay, so if I create a function, so okay, so let's create a function that is a table which will take a input, okay, that is nothing but n, and here in the return statement I'm trying to write a lambda, okay, so lambda, and here I'm trying to write, see how the syntax of lambda goes, syntax, okay, so lambda, 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 okay, then it has like your variable, okay, and then it has your expression, okay, so generally it will expr, generally it will follow this mechanism. So here what I am trying to say is, okay, so let's take any variable, let's say x, and what I am trying to say is x into n, okay, so this is nothing but, let's say, this x was like the number which was entering, and this is nothing but this multiplication. That is what I'm trying to write over here. Let's say the user is giving an input. Okay, let's take a input. So let's say integer, and we will use an input function, and let's enter the number, please. Enter the table number which you want to print. Okay, we are taking that input from a user, and then what we are trying to do, this will become a little complicated. Okay, table of n. Okay, so I have defined, like, see here I have defined a lambda function, okay, so in this I'm taking an input from a user, I'm defining to this variable, and then applying a loop for I in range, that is nothing but from 1 to 10, okay, and I'm trying 1 2 3 4, and I'm trying to use a print statement, and in this print statement I'm just trying to write n, then ni का ऊपर से, then it will be into, right, फिर उसके बाद मेरा लूप में आएगा I, right, फिर that will be equal to, then I'll just call my lambda function, that is nothing but p of I, right. So the lambda function will be like iterable on the value I. So define the function. So I have defined returning its lambda, taking the user. So defining that and calling it over here. Looks good to me. Let's test this. Enter the table number. Let's say 5. Working. Cool. I was just like a little susceptible over here. So, okay. So here what I've done is, okay, so I've used like Lambda. Okay. So whatever the logic like we were trying to write in a little while earlier in print statement. Okay. So that I have embedded in a function. Okay. And that function I've used in a Lambda. Okay. So this is like a little tricky way which I have shown. Okay. But it's like just remember like the lambda functions are the anonymous function like which you can create during the execution, means like during the flow, and you don't have to recall again and again. Okay, so the best example of your lambda functions are your map, okay, filter, okay, and your reduce, okay, which we would be seeing heavily. Okay, now what is a map function? Okay, so map is nothing but a map as the name itself suggests, it is mapping something. So map applies a function, okay, to all the items. Okay, what it does is it applies to all the items in an input list. Okay, what happens is, so map applies a function to all of the items in a list. So let's say, let me remove this. So let's say there is a list. So list is nothing but something like, let's say there is a list equals to, let's say that list has a value, and that value is nothing but, let's say 10 comma 20 comma 30 30 sorry 30 comma 40 and finally 50. Let's say there are 5 values. Okay, and here I'm trying to write something. Okay, so whatever logic which I will be writing, okay, so let's say using the lambda, let's say using like my lambda logic or lambda functions, okay, so I'm trying to make use of a map function. So what this map says is, okay, map applies a function to all the items in a list, which means that whatever logic we will be writing, it will be applying to all the elements one by one, similar to your for loop. Okay, but there is a difference between your map and flat map, which we will be seeing later. Okay, but let's understand few things with a map. So it applies a function to all the items in the input list. Okay, so and it gets operated, and it get operated on each element one by one, similar to your for loop. Okay, now let's try to see a small example. Hopefully now you'll try to understand. Let's say I'm trying to create a list that is nothing but an items. In this items, let's say I'm trying to write few values that is nothing but 1 comma 2 comma 3 comma 4 comma 5. Okay, and I'm trying to remove a square of each number. How I can do that? Simply I can apply a for loop for I in items, right? And simply I will say sq dot append. Okay, and here I will say whatever the value is I to the power of 2, right? That will give me the square, and finally I will print my square. So if I just do this, control C, and if I execute this, so I should get square of my 5 numbers. So if you see, the square of 1 is 1, the square of 2 is 4, the square of 3 is 9, 4 of 16, and 5 of 25. So we are getting this using a traditional for loop. Okay, now how this is getting applied using your lambda or anonymous functions. Okay, so I'm defining the same list. Here I'm trying to write square equals to, okay, as you say, as I'm trying to demonstrate you with a map function. Okay, so what does map does is it applies a function to all the items in the input list, right? Now here in this map item, okay, I'm trying to apply a lambda function. Okay, so what it does, it applies a function. So I'm applying a function, and that function should be applied in all these elements. So that's why I'm trying to write lambda. As I told you, the first is like your variable and the second is like your expression. Okay, this is how you'll have to do. So this is like what is happening, and it is taking, I need to pass this as a list because it needs some input list, right? If you see, it needs an input list. So this is the input list. Either I can pass this directly over here or I can pass this as a variable. Okay, so this is the map function which I'm applying using a anonymous, that is lambda, and this will give me an object. So I have what I am trying to do is I'm converting. So let me just show you first. So let's say print and sq. So let me copy this and let me execute this. So it is returning me an object. Okay, so what I will do is I'll just wrap on top of that as a list. So let me copy this, re-execute this code, and finally I'm getting the same result. If you remember, like list comprehension, and like we were trying to play. So in a similar fashion, like lambda are the anonymous functions, okay, which we can write the code, and we would be writing this lambda again and again, like in PySpark, lot many times. But there will be like supporting methods like map, flat map, reduce, and so on. Okay, same with like I have written using a for loop, and here I have written using a lambda. Okay, so understood like what map does. It applies a function to all the items and it takes one input list. So what I'm trying to do in this map, and I'm trying to apply a lambda function, and I'm trying to take an input list. Okay, so that is your map. Then filter is as simple as that in any database languages or in any of your things you have seen. So filter is nothing but to filter the data. Okay, so how you can filter the data? So mm, let's say I am trying to, so let's say here, so filter. So what filter does? It filters the data or reduce the data, filters or reduce the data, okay, based on certain conditions. Okay, what it does, it filters the data or it reduces the data based on certain conditions. Okay, and this function, okay, returns boolean value, that is true or false. Okay, it will not return an object. Okay, so it will return a true or false. So what we will do is, let's first see the small first see. So what I'm trying to do, let's say I'm trying to define a list, that is a number list. Okay, and I'm trying to take a range, let's say from -5 till 5, from negative to the positive. I'm trying to take a range. And let's say I'm trying to write, let's say number list equals to, let's say an empty list I'm trying to create. I'm trying to iterate on my number list, which is like the range which is I'm having from -5 to 5, and I'm writing a if condition. If my I is less than 0 or less than, less than 0 or less than equal to 0, your condition 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. So if I is less than 0, okay, so what I need to do is, let's say I need to see those numbers. So what I need to say, so num of list dot append. Okay, so let's say I, and finally what I'm trying to do is, let's say I'm trying to print my list which I got. Okay, so if I am just trying to execute this code with a for loop, control C and control V. So I'm just trying to get a negative numbers. Okay, so ideally the list, so if I just change this, so let's say if I want, let's say 3, if I execute this, I'm getting my like positive numbers also. Okay, so I'm trying to filter the data. Let's say I'm trying to write certain code and I'm trying to filter the data using like my uh, for loop and with certain conditions. So if condition is nothing but your filtering. If that condition is meeting, I'm trying to do something. Now the same thing can be achieved using Lambda by applying a filter. How? Let's understand that. Okay, let's copy this same list. We will try to copy, and let's say I'm trying to write a Lambda over here, and let's say this is the list, which is nothing number of list, and let's say result equals to. Okay, so what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to do use a filter. So filter, again it will take a function, so that is nothing but your Lambda function which we are trying to take. As I told you, it takes an variable, and then it takes an expression. So x is less than 0, right? Then I need to pass an input list, so that is nothing but this range, right? Control C and control V. And as this will return an object, and I don't want to see an object, I want to see an output. So that's why I'm trying to write print of my result. And let's copy this piece and re-execute this piece. So we should be able to get the same result. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to apply a filter using my Lambda functions. Okay, so your map, filter, map and flat map are all your example of your higher order functions. Why? Because if you see, it is taking one function as input or a parameter to other function. So again, like sometimes they will ask you like, can you give me some examples of your higher order functions? Okay, so you can plainly say map is one of your example of your higher order function. Okay, so map, then we have filter. Okay, in a similar fashion we have like then reduce. As the names itself says reduce, it is trying to do something which means like let's see reduce. Okay, what is reduce? So reduce it is a useful function for performing some computation on a list. Okay, useful for performing computation on a list. Okay, and it returns the result. What it does, it returns the result. Okay, this is a very important point. What it does, it applies a rolling computation. What it does, it applies a rolling computation to sequential pair of values in a list. Okay, so what I mean to say is, let's say I have this list. Control C. So let's say I have this list. Okay, so it is selling rolling computation to sequential pair. So first it will do addition of these two numbers. Let's say I want to find out the addition of two numbers. So first it will take to the numbers 1 plus 2 is 3. Then it will take this. So outcome of 1 plus 2 will give me one value, that is 3. Then that 3 plus 3 will become 6. Then again it will take the next two, then the next two. That's how it will be. Okay, so it's like a rolling computation to a sequential pair of values. Okay, so that's how it will be. So let's say here I'm trying to define L as a list. Okay, and a small list which I'm trying to define, and let's say I'm trying to iterate on that. So let's say for let's say for I in, let's say list, and I'm trying to define a, let's say product. So product is nothing but, so let's say prod into number. What I am trying to do over here is, so let's say this will, so let's say prod equals to 1, otherwise it will give me an error. So let's say I am trying to execute this small piece. Okay, so type object is not iterable, which is cheap. So let's do print. So what I'm trying to do is, let's say my product define kar raha hu, then I have defined a L, that is list. So this is not iterable, which it was giving us the error. Okay, so okay, looks sorted. Control C. Let's do execute this. Name num is not defined. Okay, num Okay, so actually the first thing was like I was just trying to execute this. Okay, so it was telling that the object is not iterable. So I was the list which I created was not, I was not referencing appropriately, so that was the error it was giving me. Hence I was not getting the result and it was giving me an error. Okay, so now what I have done is I'm just taken a list and I'm trying to find out the computation of this. Okay, so 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 3 is 6, 6 plus 4 is 24, 24 into 5 is like 120. Okay, so what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to do the same thing I can do with my lambda also. Okay, so let's piece this. Hopefully the error. So uh we so this reduce. Okay, so this is a reduce. So this comes. We need to import this. Okay, and this comes from func tools. Okay, don't worry. So you will slowly once you start using this, you will get to know from which package or from which module your functions or your methods are coming, because I will not be doing asterisk, because mostly you will see from this import all. We will not do that. We will try to write all the codes scratch and everything, so that you'll get to know, okay, what we are trying to do, what we are trying to reference, everything in PySpark. Okay, so generally I make a practice on that, but once you go into the project, mostly you will see asterisk like from this import all, from this import all. So they don't write everything, but because it is everything available. But here, see, now you got to know LRU, you got to know reduce, they are coming from your func tools. Maybe next week when we will try to see the logging method, so you'll get to know from which packages we need to import for loggings, for how to read the XML file, how to read the JSON file in Python. Okay, so you'll get to know. Let's say I want to connect to the MySQL database, so which connector or which package I need. So slowly you will come to know. Okay, so what I'm trying to so let's say prd equals to, okay, so I'm trying to use my reduce function as it takes one function. So I'm trying to use a lambda, that is an anonymous function. I'm trying to take a variable. So here I'm trying to take two variable x comma y, that will be nothing but my x into y, because I need to multiply my two, right? And uh, I need to pass this list. So either you can pass a variable which will have a list, or directly you can pass this list as a value also, an input list. It's your call how you are passing. Okay, and I think this needs to go in the, otherwise it will get confused where it is uh, going wrong. So let me copy this and let me paste this and let's execute this. Okay, we are getting the same result. So the same computation which I am trying to apply, first the computation will be rolling computation on a sequential pair. So first this pair will be taken 1 into 2, 3, then 3 into 3, then the output of that will take the next digit, and then finally it will take the last digit. Okay, so that's how your reduce map reduce. So that's why I like map reduce word count program, a famous word count program. What it does is it applies a logic to every element. Okay, then it tries to reduce by doing a rolling computation, that we will see that. Okay, so I've just given a brief introduction on to these functions, but again, once we go to PySpark, again we will see this. So here Python is a programming language. I'm just making you aware of all the concepts, but once we go to the PySpark, we will be digging everything in deep. Okay, any questions on these lambda functions, map, reduce and filter, and the lambda and the higher and anonymous?
Sir, one question.